cold wind howled across the Montana prairie, whipping through Sarah Mitchell's hair as she raced toward the burning barn. The golden wheat fields surrounding the homestead swayed in the gale, their harvest still weeks away, while orange flames licked hungrily at the night sky. "Pa!" Her desperate cry was swallowed by the roar of the fire. "Pa, where are you?" Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she reached the barn's entrance. Smoke billowed outward, stinging her eyes and choking her lungs. For one paralyzing moment, she froze. Memories of another fire 5 years earlier threatening to overwhelm her. Her mother's screams, the collapsing roof, the helplessness. Not again, not Pa too. Tying her apron over her face, Sarah plunged into the inferno. The heat was immediate and oppressive, pressing against her skin like a physical force. Squinting through the smoke, she spotted a crumpled figure near the back wall. She scrambled over fallen beams, ignoring the burn of hot wood against her palms. Howard Mitchell lay unconscious, his weathered face ghostly pale against the orange glow of the flames. With strength born of desperation, Sarah dragged her father's limp form across the barn floor. A support beam crashed down behind them, sending sparks showering through the air. Each breath was agony as she pulled him towards safety, inch by excruciating inch. They burst into the cool night air just as the barn's roof collapsed with a thunderous groan. Sarah collapsed to her knees, cradling her father's head in her lap. "Pa, Pa, can you hear me?" Howard's eyelids fluttered. His breathing was shallow, labored from the smoke. "Sarah." His voice was barely audible. "The fire." "Don't talk, Pa. Save your strength." She wiped soot from his face with trembling hands. "Help's coming." But even as neighbors arrived with buckets and blankets, Sarah knew the truth she'd been denying. The look in Doc Wilson's eyes when he examined Howard confirmed it. Her father wouldn't survive the night. 3 days later, Sarah sat beside Howard's bed in the small bedroom of their farmhouse. The window was open, allowing the scent of summer prairie grass to mingle with the medicinal smells of the sick room. Howard's breathing had grown more labored, his skin taking on a waxy pallor that frightened Sarah more than his burns. "Pa, please hold on." Sarah clutched his weathered hand. "Doc Wilson will be back soon." Howard's blue eyes, so like her own, fixed on her face with sudden clarity. "No time left, my girl." He squeezed her hand with surprising strength. "The wheat, the harvest." "Don't think about that now," Sarah insisted. "Listen to me." Howard struggled to sit up, his voice suddenly urgent. "That wheat field is all we have left. If you don't bring it in, the bank will take everything." Sarah swallowed back tears. "I know, Pa. I'll figure something out." "Promise me," Howard rasped, his eyes suddenly clear and desperate. "Promise me you won't sell the farm. It's not just land, it's your mother's legacy and everything we built together." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And Sarah, it wasn't an accident. I found him, searching." "Pa, what do you mean? Who was searching?" But Howard's strength was fading. "Promise me," he repeated, unable to finish his warning. "I promise, Pa." The words came automatically, even as doubt gnawed at her. How could she, alone, save a farm that had required both her parents' strength to build? And what had her father been trying to tell her about his accident? Howard's gaze drifted to the window, to the golden fields beyond. "Your mother would be proud of the woman you have become." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "So strong, just like her." His breathing hitched, then slowed. Sarah watched, helpless, as the light gradually faded from her father's eyes. When his hand went slack in hers, she bent her head and allowed the tears to fall at last. As a last breath left Howard Mitchell's body, Sarah felt the weight of her 24 years multiplied tenfold. The farm that had been her family's dream now rested solely on her shoulders, along with the mounting debts, the unharvested fields, and the looming threat of autumn storms. Howard Mitchell's funeral was held the next day, a simple affair attended by neighboring farmers and townspeople who had known and respected him. Sarah stood dry-eyed beside the grave as the preacher spoke of resurrection and eternal peace. She had no tears left, only a hollow emptiness and the crushing weight of responsibility. As the mourners dispersed, offering awkward condolences, Sarah found herself confronted by Joseph Blackwood. At 40, Blackwood cut an imposing figure in his tailored suit, tall and broad-shouldered, with carefully trimmed dark hair and a neatly waxed mustache. As the wealthiest landowner in the county, he commanded respect, even deference from most locals. Miss Mitchell. His voice was smooth as cream, his eyes calculating beneath a veneer of sympathy. My sincere condolences for your loss. Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. Sarah kept her tone neutral, though something about the man had always unsettled her. I understand your father left some financial matters unresolved. He glanced toward the freshly covered grave. I'd be happy to discuss purchasing your property at a fair price. A young woman shouldn't have to bear such burdens alone. A flash of memory struck Sarah, her mother's voice. That man would steal the pennies from a dead man's eyes. Elizabeth Mitchell had never trusted Joseph Blackwood. That's very kind, Sarah replied coolly, but I have no intention of selling the farm. Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. Admirable sentiment, Miss Mitchell, but sentiment won't bring in the harvest or pay the bank. He gestured toward the golden fields visible beyond the churchyard. Think practically. What can one woman do against all that? Before Sarah could respond, she felt a gentle hand on her arm. Edith Summers, a widow who farmed the neighboring property, stepped between them. At 67, Edith was small but sturdy, her face weathered by decades of prairie life, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Sarah needs rest, Mr. Blackwood, not business propositions at her father's funeral. Edith's tone was polite but firm. Blackwood inclined his head with practiced grace. Of course, my apologies for the timing. He turned back to Sarah. The offer stands, Miss Mitchell. I'm only trying to help. As he walked away, Edith squeezed Sarah's arm. That man's help comes with a price tag, child. Your father knew it, and your mother too. Sarah nodded, watching Blackwood's retreating figure with a mixture of anger and fear. For a moment, unbidden, a vivid memory flashed before her. Flames consuming the old storage barn 5 years ago, her mother trapped inside, screaming. Sarah had been in town when the fire started. By the time she returned, it was too late. The scent of smoke from a mourner's pipe made her flinch, her heart racing suddenly. She turned away, forcing steady breaths until the panic subsided. Since that day, fire had become her constant terror. Come along, dear, Edith was saying. You'll stay with me tonight. No need to be alone. Sarah shook her head. Thank you, Edith, but I need to go home. There's work to be done. The morning after they laid Howard Mitchell in the ground beside his beloved wife, Sarah rose with the sun, determination setting her jaw in a hard line. She pulled on her father's old work shirt over her dress, rolled up the sleeves, and headed for the barn. The ancient harvesting scythe felt awkward and heavy in her hands, but she had no choice. She'd watched her father harvest for years, had even helped with binding the sheaves. How different could it be? By midday, she had managed to clear only a small corner of the nearest field. Blisters had formed and burst on her palms. Her back screamed in protest, and tears of frustration mingled with the sweat on her face. At this rate, she would never finish before the first snow. Sarah collapsed onto a patch of stubble, fighting despair. In the farmhouse desk lay the letter from the bank. Payment due after harvest, or foreclosure would follow. Her father had extended the loan to rebuild after the fire that took her mother, and now that debt loomed like a vulture circling overhead. The sound of hoofbeats made her look up. A rider approached from the main road, his silhouette dark against the brilliant blue Montana sky. Sarah straightened, one hand shielding her eyes from the sun, the other still gripping the scythe. As he drew closer, Sarah saw a man perhaps in his early 30s, riding a powerful black stallion. He wore the practical attire of a working man, faded denim, a cotton shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. When he removed the hat, she noted his features: strong jaw, straight nose, and eyes the color of the forest after rain. A jagged scar ran from his left temple down his cheek, pulling slightly at the corner of his eye. "Afternoon, ma'am," he called, reining in his horse a respectful distance away. "Name's Noah Winters. I'm looking for work, and they said in town the Mitchell place might be hiring for the harvest." Sarah almost laughed at the cruel irony. "They were mistaken, Mr. Winters. I can't afford to hire anyone." She gestured toward the vast expanse of wheat. "My father died 3 days ago, and I'm trying to bring in the harvest myself." The man's expression softened as he dismounted, leading his horse closer. She noticed he walked with a pronounced limp, favoring his right leg. I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Mitchell. Sarah, she said automatically, then wondered why she'd offered her given name to a stranger. Noah looked out over the fields, then back to her raw, bleeding hands. You'll never finish alone. Not before the weather turns. I don't have much choice, Sarah replied, lifting her chin with stubborn pride. I promised my father I wouldn't lose the farm. Noah removed his hat completely, revealing thick brown hair streaked with premature silver at the temples. His gaze evaluated the situation with a practiced eye. I need work, Miss Sarah, and you need help. I'll take room and board, meals included. Payment can wait until after the harvest is sold. Sarah shook her head. I can't guarantee. I'm not asking for guarantees, Noah interrupted gently. Just a chance to earn my keep and help someone who needs it. Before Sarah could respond, Noah reached for the scythe. This won't do for a field this size. Do you have a cradle scythe in that barn? And a grinding wheel to keep it sharp? Sarah hesitated, studying the stranger. His clothes were worn but clean, his manner direct but respectful. Most telling was the calloused state of his hands. This was a man who knew physical labor. Yes, I believe so. My father had several tools, but I don't know much about them. Noah nodded. Let's take a look then. Daylight's wasting. Something about the quiet confidence in his voice made Sarah relinquish the scythe and lead him toward the weathered barn. As they walked, she noticed his slight limp grew more pronounced on the uneven ground, and she wondered what story lay behind it. In the cool darkness of the barn, Noah quickly located the cradle scythe, a more efficient harvesting tool with wooden fingers that caught and laid the grain in neat rows. This will serve us better, he said, testing its weight. And you have a good grinding wheel for keeping it sharp. Us? Sarah questioned. Noah's eyes met hers steadily. Yes, ma'am, us. I can't let you lose your farm when I have two strong arms to help. For the first time since her father fell ill, Sarah felt a small flame of hope ignite in her chest. Yet caution tempered her relief. I can't pay you much, Mr. Winters. Noah, he corrected with the hint of a smile. And we'll worry about payment when the wheat's in. Do you have a spare room where I can bunk? Sarah hesitated. Having a strange man stay on the property would raise eyebrows in town. Her reputation was already precarious as a single woman alone on a farm. Reading her thoughts, Noah added, I can sleep in the storage shed if that's more proper. I don't need much. The shed will do, Sarah agreed, relief evident in her voice. There's clean straw in the loft. Perfect, Noah said, hefting the cradle scythe over his shoulder. Now, if you'll show me your property lines, I'll get started right away. As they walked the boundaries of the Mitchell farm, Sarah felt a curious sense of comfort in Noah's presence. He asked practical questions about the soil, the wheat variety, and the average yield from previous years. There was nothing presumptuous or threatening about him, just a steady competence that eased some of the overwhelming burden from her shoulders. Yet as they crested a rise overlooking the golden fields, Sarah caught Noah glancing toward the family cemetery where her parents now lay side by side. Something in his gaze, recognition perhaps, or sadness, stirred her suspicion. Have you been in these parts before, Mr. Winters? She asked casually. Noah turned back to her, his expression composed once more. Just passing through on my way to Oregon. Heard there's good land to be had out there. Sarah nodded but made a mental note of the moment. Whatever Noah Winters' reasons for stopping at the Mitchell farm, she sensed there was more to the story than a simple search for harvest work. True to his word, Noah began work immediately. Sarah watched in amazement as he moved through the field with practiced efficiency, the cradle scythe slicing through wheat stalks as he laid them in neat rows. His movements were rhythmic and powerful despite his limp, becoming more pronounced as the afternoon wore on. Sarah followed behind, gathering and binding the wheat into sheaves as her father had taught her. By sunset, they had cleared more ground than she'd expected possible. When dusk approached, Sarah called Noah in for supper. He washed at the outdoor pump, the cold water sluicing away the day's sweat and dust. At the kitchen table, he ate ravenously but with impeccable manners, complimenting Sarah's simple stew and biscuits. Where are you from, Noah? Sarah asked, curious about this man who had appeared when she needed help most. Noah took a sip of water before answering. Originally Kansas, my family had a small farm there. A shadow crossed his features. Lost it in '67, drought took the crops, bank took the land. Sarah nodded sympathetically. And since then, working my way through the territories, cattle drives, ranch work, whatever pays honest wages. He flexed his calloused hands. Was heading to Oregon when I passed through your town. What's in Oregon? Sarah asked, pouring him more coffee. Noah's eyes took on a distant look. Land. Government's still offering homesteads to those willing to work for them. He smiled faintly. Thought I might try my hand at having roots again. Sarah understood the yearning in his voice all too well. That's a fine dream. Just a dream for now, Noah replied pragmatically. Need to save more money first. After supper, Noah insisted on helping with the dishes before retiring to the shed. Sarah watched from the doorway as he crossed the yard, his tall figure silhouetted against the deepening twilight. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel entirely alone. But as she closed the door, her gaze fell on a framed photograph of her parents on their wedding day. Her father's serious face, her mother's gentle smile. The promise she'd made echoed in her mind. I'm trying, Pa, she whispered to the empty room. I'm doing what I can. Sarah awoke before dawn to the sound of the grinding wheel as Noah sharpened the scythe. She dressed quickly and prepared a hearty breakfast of oatmeal and the last of her father's smoked bacon. As they ate, Noah outlined his strategy for the harvest. We'll need to work from sunrise to sunset if we want to beat the weather. I can handle most of the cutting, but I'll need you to help with binding the sheaves. Sarah nodded eagerly. I can do that. I've helped Pa before. Noah looked at her doubtfully. It's hard work, especially for someone not accustomed to it. I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Winters, Sarah said firmly, and this is my farm. A smile tugged at Noah's lips. So it is, Miss Mitchell, so it is. They established a routine over the next few days. Noah would cut the wheat while Sarah followed behind, gathering and binding the stalks into sheaves. They worked in companionable silence most of the time, the rhythm of their labor punctuated by occasional conversation. Sarah learned that Noah had fought briefly for the Union in the final year of the war, though he spoke little of that time. His limp, she discovered, came from a cattle drive accident 3 years prior when a startled steer had pinned him against a canyon wall. Doctor said I'd never walk right again, Noah told her as they paused for water. But a man needs his legs in this line of work, so I made sure to prove them wrong. Sarah admired his determination. You certainly move well enough with that scythe. Years of practice, Noah replied modestly. My father put a scythe in my hands when I was 12 years old. Said a man should know how to bring in a harvest even if he raises cattle. By the end of the first week, Sarah's hands had toughened and her muscles had adjusted to the demanding work. The nights brought bone-deep exhaustion, but also satisfaction as they watched the harvested portion of the field grow steadily larger. They were racing against time, and they both knew it. The evenings were growing cooler and the morning dew heavier, signs that autumn was deepening. If rain came before they finished, the wheat could mold or sprout in the fields, becoming worthless. On the 8th evening, as Sarah was bringing a plate of food to the shed where Noah stayed, she paused at the sound of his voice. He appeared to be talking in his sleep, the words drifting through the partially open door. Thomas, why did you save me? Why me and not the others? Sarah frowned, a chill running down her spine despite the warm evening. Thomas was her father's name. How would Noah know that? The next morning, as they worked side by side in the field, Sarah studied Noah when he wasn't looking. The careful way he moved, the distant look that sometimes came into his eyes when he thought she wasn't watching, the way he occasionally glanced toward the family cemetery. Noah, she said finally, straightening from binding a sheaf, did you know my father from the war? Noah's hand stilled on the scythe. For a moment, he seemed to be weighing his words carefully. I've been looking for a soldier named Thomas from Montana Territory, he admitted finally. A man who saved my life during a Confederate ambush in 1865. I wasn't sure if your father was the same Thomas until I arrived here. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Why didn't you say something when you first came? Noah resumed his cutting, not meeting her eyes. I wasn't certain. Thomas is a common name, and even if he was the right man, he hesitated. I didn't want you to think I was here out of pity or obligation. I genuinely need the work, Sarah. Sarah nodded slowly, processing this revelation. Her father had rarely spoken of his war experiences. Could he have been the man Noah was searching for? That night, after Noah retired to the shed, Sarah opened the old trunk at the foot of her father's bed. Inside, beneath carefully folded uniforms, she found a leather-bound journal in a small wooden box containing military medals. Her fingers trembled as she opened the journal to the first page. April 12th, 1865. The war is finally ending. News of Lee's surrender reached us today. The men celebrated, but I find I cannot join them. I have seen too much death to find joy in victory. I think only of returning to Elizabeth and our farm, of seeing our daughter again. Sarah spent hours reading by lamplight, learning about a side of her father she'd never known. Howard Mitchell had served as an intelligence officer, responsible for a special reconnaissance unit. He wrote of the weight of command, of decisions that sent men to their deaths, and of one failed mission that seemed to haunt him most. There was no specific mention of a soldier named Noah, but several entries referenced a young private with the initials NW, who had been gravely wounded in an ambush. Howard had carried the man to safety, while others in the unit perished. Sarah closed the journal, her mind racing. If Noah was indeed this NW, why had he really come here? Was it truly just to find the man who saved him? Or was there something more? She resolved to watch him more carefully. Help with the harvest was one thing, but she wouldn't be fooled by a stranger with unknown motives, no matter how desperate her situation. The following Sunday, Edith Summers insisted Sarah attend church services with her. "You can't hide away forever, child," the older woman said firmly. "And that handsome drifter of yours is causing enough talk as it is. Best to show your face and silence the gossips." Sarah reluctantly agreed, though she bristled at Edith's description. "He's not my drifter. He's just helping with the harvest." Edith's knowing look made Sarah flush. "If you say so, dear." At church, Sarah endured the scrutiny of the entire congregation. Whispers followed her down the aisle, and more than one matron cast disapproving glances her way. She held her head high, focusing on Reverend Samuel Thompson's sermon about perseverance in times of trial. After the service, the minister sought her out. At 58, Reverend Thompson was a tall, thin man with kind eyes and a gentle manner that belied his powerful pulpit presence. "Miss Mitchell, how are you holding up?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. "As well as can be expected, Reverend. Thank you for your prayers." "I understand you've taken on help for the harvest," he said carefully. "A stranger, I'm told." Sarah sighed. "Yes, Mr. Winters is assisting with the wheat. I couldn't manage alone." The minister nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps I should call on you this week. Sunday dinner, perhaps? I'd like to meet this Mr. Winters." Before Sarah could respond, Joseph Blackwood approached, his Sunday suit immaculate, his manner solicitous. "Miss Mitchell, I've been hoping for a word." He bowed slightly to the minister. "Reverend Thompson." "Mr. Blackwood." The Reverend's tone cooled noticeably. Blackwood turned his attention back to Sarah. "I've heard disturbing reports about the man you've hired. Did you know he spent time in a Confederate prison camp? Has a reputation for violence?" Sarah stiffened. "Mr. Winters has been nothing but respectful and hardworking." "I'm merely concerned for your safety, my dear." Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. "A young woman alone with a man of questionable character. It's not proper, not safe." "I appreciate your concern," Sarah said coldly, "but I can manage my own affairs." As she turned to leave with Edith, she found a folded note tucked into her hymnal. Opening it, she read the simple message: "Sell the farm while you still can." Sarah's hands trembled as she showed the note to Edith in the buggy ride home. "Threatening notes now," Edith muttered. "That man's persistence is becoming dangerous." "You think it was Joseph? Who else would benefit from frightening you off your land?" Edith clicked her tongue to urge the horse faster. "Be careful, Sarah. Blackwood didn't become the richest man in the county by playing fair." When they reached the Mitchell farm, Sarah was surprised to find Noah on the roof of the storage shed, replacing broken shingles. He climbed down carefully when he saw the buggy approach. "Thought I'd make some repairs while observing the Sabbath," he explained, wiping sweat from his brow. Sarah introduced him to Edith, who made no effort to hide her assessment of the man. Noah bore her scrutiny with good grace, answering her pointed questions about his background and intentions with surprising patience. "Well," Edith said finally, apparently satisfied, "you seem decent enough, Mr. Winters. But you should know this town runs on gossip, and right now you two are the main course." "We've invited Reverend Thompson for Sunday dinner next week," Sarah added, noting how Noah's expression remained carefully neutral at this news. Good, Edith approved. His presence will help quiet some of the talk. Though not all of it, I warned. She fixed Noah with a stern look. You continue sleeping in that shed, young man. Propriety matters in these parts. After Edith left, Sarah confronted Noah about Blackwood's accusations. Were you really in a Confederate prison camp? Do you have a violent past I should know about? Noah's face darkened. I was a prisoner at Andersonville for 3 months. As for violence, he hesitated. I fought in a war, Sarah. I've done things I'm not proud of. But I've never harmed an innocent person, and I never would. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper, worn thin at the creases from frequent handling. I've carried this for 10 years. Sarah took it carefully, unfolding what appeared to be a letter. The handwriting was unmistakably her father's. Private Winters, you asked why I pulled you from that field when others were left behind. I have no answer that will ease your mind. In war, we make choices that haunt us. But know this, your life was not saved by chance or favoritism, but because you were the only one I could reach in time. You have been given a second chance. Use it well. Live a life worthy of those who didn't return. Captain Howard Mitchell. Sarah looked up from the letter, her suspicions softening. He never told me about this. Many veterans don't speak of what they've seen, Noah said quietly. When I heard of your father's passing, I felt compelled to come, to pay my respects to the man who gave me a second chance at life. His eyes held hers steadily. I didn't plan to stay, but when I saw you struggling alone, I couldn't just ride away. Sarah wanted to believe him. The letter seemed genuine, the sentiment behind his actions sincere, yet something held her back from complete trust, a sense that Noah Winters still wasn't telling her everything. Reverend Thompson will be here next Sunday, she said finally. I hope you'll join us for dinner. Noah nodded. I'd be honored. As he turned to resume his work on the shed, Sarah noticed him wince slightly, his hand going to his injured leg. You should rest, she said, concerned despite her lingering doubts. You've been pushing yourself too hard. We can't afford to rest, Noah replied, but his smile took the edge off his words. That wheat won't wait, and neither will the weather. Sarah watched him climb back onto the roof, his movements careful but determined. Whatever Noah Winters' secrets might be, she couldn't deny one thing. Without his help, she would lose her father's farm. For now, at least, their fates were intertwined. As Sarah and Noah continued the harvest, they developed a comfortable rhythm together. Each day they rose before dawn, worked until dusk, and slowly built a cautious friendship. Noah's knowledge of farming impressed Sarah, and his quiet strength provided a reassurance she hadn't realized how much she needed. One evening, as they were storing tools in the old storage barn, rebuilt after the fire that claimed her mother, Sarah accidentally knocked over a lantern. The glass shattered, spilling oil across the wooden floor. When the oil ignited, Sarah froze in terror, unable to move as the small flames began to spread. Sarah! Noah's voice seemed to come from far away. Sarah, move! She couldn't. Her feet felt rooted to the spot, her breath caught in her throat, her body rigid with fear as memories overwhelmed her. Her mother's screams, the collapsing roof, the helplessness. In an instant, Noah was beside her, pulling her back with one arm while throwing dirt on the flames with the other. Within moments, the small fire was extinguished, leaving only a scorched patch on the floor and the acrid smell of smoke in the air. Sarah trembled violently, tears streaming down her face as Noah guided her outside to the cool evening air. Breathe, he instructed gently, keeping a steadying hand on her shoulder. Just breathe, Sarah. When her breathing had steadied, she wiped away tears of shame and fear. I'm sorry, I should have. No apologies needed. Noah's voice was soft. We all have our demons. Sarah looked up at him, suddenly needing to explain. 5 years ago, our old storage barn caught fire. My mother was inside, checking on preserved foods for winter. Her voice cracked. I was in town. By the time I got back, it was too late. I watched it burn with her inside. Noah's expression was one of profound understanding. And now fire terrifies you. Sarah nodded, embarrassed by what she saw as weakness. It's foolish, I know. It's not foolish at all. Noah guided her to sit on a nearby bench. After Andersonville, I couldn't bear to be in enclosed spaces. Still can't sometimes. They sat in companionable silence as twilight deepened around them. Finally, Noah spoke again. Fire is a primal fear, Sarah, but it's also essential for survival. Perhaps, perhaps we could work on your fear, a little at a time. How? The very idea made her pulse quicken with anxiety. Start small, a single match. Just watching it burn down, knowing you're in control, then maybe a candle. His eyes were kind in the gathering darkness. No one overcomes fear overnight, but with patience, it's possible. Sarah wasn't certain she believed him, but she appreciated his understanding. For the first time, she felt she'd glimpsed the real Noah Winters beneath his reserved exterior. A man who understood pain and fear because he'd faced his own. As they sat together on that bench, the first stars appearing overhead, Sarah was struck by how quickly this stranger had become essential to her life. Not just for the harvest, but for moments like this, quiet understanding in a world that had shown her little mercy. 2 weeks after Noah's arrival, they had completed a third of the harvest. The weather held, though morning frost served as a reminder that winter was approaching. Each day brought them closer to saving the farm, but also closer to the moment when Noah would continue his journey to Oregon. Sarah tried not to dwell on that inevitability. Instead, she focused on the task at hand, grateful for his presence now, when she needed it most. One evening, a sudden storm blew in from the mountains, forcing them to abandon the fields and take shelter in the storage barn. Wind howled around the sturdy structure, rattling the windows as rain pounded against the roof. We should check the harvested sheaves, Noah said, peering through the window at the darkening sky. Make sure they're secure. I'll get the lantern. Sarah moved toward the far wall of the barn, where supplies were kept. Noah's voice stopped her. No need, there's an oil lamp and matches on the shelf to your left. Sarah turned slowly, a chill running through her that had nothing to do with the storm. How did you know that? You've never been in this barn before. In the dim light, she saw Noah's expression change, a flicker of something. Guilt? Regret? Crossing his features. I have been here before, Sarah, he said quietly. 5 years ago, the night of the fire. Sarah felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath her feet. What? Noah moved toward her, hands outstretched in a placating gesture. I was passing through, saw the flames from the road. I tried to help, joined the bucket line. You were here when my mother died? Sarah's voice rose, competing with the storm outside. And you never told me? I wanted to, but I wasn't sure how. Noah's face was etched with regret. I didn't stay after the fire was out. I didn't meet your family then. But I never forgot that night, the tragedy of it. Sarah backed away from him, emotions churning, betrayal, confusion, anger. What else haven't you told me? Why are you really here? Lightning flashed, illuminating Noah's troubled face. I came to find Howard Mitchell because he saved my life during the war. When I heard he'd passed, I wanted to pay my respects, maybe help his family if I could. Finding you struggling with the harvest alone, it seemed like fate. And the fire, my mother's death, was that fate too? Sarah's voice broke. Sarah, please. Noah took a step toward her, but she held up a hand to stop him. I trusted you, she whispered. I let you into our home, told you things I've never told anyone, and all this time you've been keeping secrets. The storm raged outside, mirroring the tumult in Sarah's heart. She had begun to care for this man, to depend on him. Now she wondered if she knew him at all. I'm sorry, Noah said simply. I should have told you sooner. I was afraid. Afraid you'd send me away before the harvest was complete. Afraid you'd think I came out of pity rather than respect. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the summer evening. I need time to think, to process this. Noah nodded, respecting her space. I understand. For what it's worth, Sarah, everything else I've told you has been the truth. I may have omitted parts of my story, but I've never lied to you. They waited out the storm in tense silence, each lost in private thoughts. When the rain finally eased, they emerged to find the wheat fields sodden but largely intact. The harvested sheaves had weathered the storm well, protected by the careful stacking Noah had insisted upon. As they parted for the night, Sarah paused at her door. We'll continue the harvest tomorrow, The farm comes first. But this conversation isn't over, Noah. He nodded, his tall figure silvered by moonlight as the clouds parted overhead. I'll tell you everything, Sarah, when you're ready to hear it. Sarah closed the door behind her, leaning against it as tears finally came. She had begun to trust Noah, to believe in the possibility of saving the farm with his help. Now doubt crept back in, poisoning the fragile connection they had formed. Yet as she prepared for bed, her eye fell on her father's journal, still open on the bedside table. Howard Mitchell's words seemed to speak directly to her. In war, as in life, we rarely have the luxury of perfect choices. We must judge people not by their mistakes, but by how they attempt to make them right. Sarah sighed, knowing that come morning she would be working beside Noah Winters again. The harvest wouldn't wait for her to sort through her conflicted feelings. For now, at least, necessity would have to override doubt. Morning came with the golden light of late summer filtering through the curtains. Sarah stood at the kitchen window, watching as Noah emerged from the storage shed, his movements stiff from yesterday's labor. Despite her lingering doubts, she couldn't deny his dedication. Every morning since his arrival, he'd been up before dawn, sharpening tools and preparing for the day's work. She set a pot of coffee on the stove, lost in thought. The revelation of Noah's presence during the fire that took her mother had reopened old wounds. 5 years had passed, yet the pain remained fresh, a constant ache beneath the surface of her daily life. And now, knowing Noah had witnessed that terrible night, added another layer of complexity to her already confused feelings about the man. When Noah knocked lightly on the door frame, Sarah composed her features into a neutral expression. "Coffee's ready," she said, pouring 2 cups. "We should check the fields, see how much damage the storm did." Noah accepted the cup with a nod of thanks. "Sarah, about last night." "The harvest comes first," she interrupted, unwilling to revisit the painful conversation. "We can talk after the day's work is done." Relief and disappointment mingled in Noah's eyes, but he respected her wishes. They drank their coffee in silence before heading out to assess the wheat fields. The morning air was heavy with moisture, the ground soft beneath their boots. The wheat stood tall but bent in places where the wind and rain had been strongest. Noah moved through the rows, checking the ripeness of the grain. "No permanent damage," he concluded, "but we'll need to wait for the ground to dry before we can continue cutting. Too much moisture makes for poor storage." Sarah nodded, calculating days against the looming deadline. "We don't have much time to spare." "We'll make it," Noah assured her, with a confidence she found both irritating and comforting. "The sun's strong today. By afternoon, we should be able to resume harvesting." As they inspected the already cut sheaves, making sure none had been scattered by the storm, Sarah heard the approach of a buggy. Edith Summers pulled up to the fence line, her weathered face set in grim lines. "Sarah, Mr. Winters!" she beckoned urgently. "You'd best come hear what's happening in town." They approached the buggy, and Sarah noticed immediately how troubled the older woman appeared. "What is it, Edith?" "It's Blackwood. He's been asking questions about your hired man here." Edith's sharp eyes fixed on Noah. "Telling anyone who'll listen that you're some kind of dangerous character. Even had the nerve to imply you might have been involved in Howard's accident." Sarah felt a chill despite the warm morning. "That's absurd. Noah wasn't even here when Pa was injured." "Of course it's absurd," Edith agreed, "but people listen to Blackwood. He's got money and influence." She lowered her voice. "And now he's saying he bought your loan from the bank, that he can foreclose whenever he chooses." Noah's expression hardened. "Can he do that?" "Legally, yes," Sarah admitted, her heart sinking. "The bank can sell the debt to anyone willing to buy it." She turned to Edith. "But why would he? It makes no sense to pay good money for a debt that might be repaid in full after harvest." "Unless he doesn't want it repaid," Noah said quietly. "Unless what he really wants is the land." Edith nodded grimly. "My thoughts exactly. That man's been buying up every parcel he can get his hands on in this valley. Yours is one of the few he hasn't managed to acquire." Sarah's mind raced. Her father had always refused to sell to Blackwood, even when times were hard. "He approached me at the funeral," she recalled, "offered to buy the farm, said it was too much for a woman to handle alone." "He's trying to intimidate you," Noah said, his voice low and angry, "using me as an excuse to frighten you into selling." "Well, it won't work. Sarah declared, though fear coiled in her stomach. This is my home. I'm not selling to Joseph Blackwood or anyone else. Edith reached out to squeeze Sarah's hand. Be careful, child. Blackwood's not used to being refused. And there's something about that man that's never sat right with me. She clicked her tongue to urge her horse forward. I'd best get back. Just wanted to warn you both to watch your backs. As Edith's buggy disappeared down the road, Sarah turned to Noah. Do you know Joseph Blackwood? Noah's face was carefully composed. I don't believe we've met. That's not what I asked. Sarah studied him intently. You recognized his name when Edith mentioned him. I saw it in your face. Noah was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. Finally, he sighed. We should have that talk now, not later. But not out here in the open. Inside the kitchen, Sarah sat across from Noah at the worn oak table where her family had shared meals for generations. The familiar setting only heightened her sense that everything she knew was shifting beneath her feet. I knew a Lieutenant Joseph Blackwood during the war, Noah began, his voice measured. He was an officer in the unit where I served as a scout. The same unit my father was connected to? Noah nodded. Your father wasn't officially part of our regiment. He was intelligence, attached temporarily to gather information about Confederate movements. And Blackwood, what was he like? Noah's expression darkened. Ambitious, ruthless, the kind of officer who saw his men as tools, not people. Sarah leaned forward. Was he there, during the ambush you mentioned? He gave the orders that sent us into that valley. Noah's hands tightened on his coffee cup. 8 men died. 3 more were wounded, including me. But you survived because my father pulled you out. Yes. Noah's eyes met hers, haunted by old memories. Your father risked his life to save mine while bullets flew around us. I've never forgotten that moment. Sarah absorbed this new information, trying to fit it into the growing puzzle that was Noah Winters. If Blackwood was your commanding officer, why would he spread rumors about you now? Would he even recognize you after all these years? I doubt it. I was just another private to him. Noah hesitated, then added, but he might recognize my name if he saw it on the registry at the boarding house in town. And he'd certainly remember your father's name. You think there's a connection between Blackwood's interest in our farm and his history with my father? Noah's face was grave. I think it's a strange coincidence that the officer who nearly got me killed in a questionable mission is now trying to take the farm of the man who saved me, especially since your father was investigating intelligence leaks at the time. Sarah stood abruptly, moved to the shelf where her father's journal lay. She brought it back to the table, opening to the entries from April 1865. Pa never spoke much about the war, but he kept this journal. She turned pages until she found what she was looking for. Here, April 18th, 1865. The leak continues. Information about our movements reaches the enemy too quickly to be coincidence. I have my suspicions, but no proof. If I'm right, a man I once respected is responsible for the deaths of good soldiers. Noah read the entry, his expression grim. Your father was investigating a traitor within our ranks, someone selling information to the Confederates. You think it was Blackwood? I can't be certain, but the timing fits, and it would explain why he's so determined to get this land. Maybe he fears your father left evidence somewhere. Sarah ran her fingers over her father's handwriting. If what you're saying is true, then Joseph Blackwood is responsible for those deaths, for your injury, and now he's threatening my home. I've been thinking about Pa's accident, Sarah said, her brow furrowed in concentration. Doc Wilson said he fell from the hayloft, broke his back, then caught pneumonia from the burns. But Pa was always careful in the barn. You think there was more to it? Noah asked. Sarah nodded slowly. The night before the fire, Pa was agitated, said he'd seen someone lurking near the property, and just before he died, he tried to tell me something, that it wasn't an accident and that he found him searching. Noah's expression darkened. If Blackwood suspected your father had evidence against him, he might have confronted him in the barn, Sarah finished, the realization chilling. Started the fire to cover his tracks. Or to make it look like an accident, Noah agreed grimly. Just like your mother's death. Sarah felt sick at the thought. If we're right, Blackwood is responsible for both my parents' deaths. We need proof, Noah said firmly. Accusations of treason against a wealthy landowner won't go far without evidence. Sarah closed the journal thoughtfully. If Pa suspected Blackwood, he might have kept evidence. He was methodical that way. Where would he hide something important? Something he didn't want found accidentally? Sarah considered the question. Her father had been a private man with habits and spaces that were exclusively his own. His study, perhaps, or maybe she trailed off, remembering something from childhood. A loose floorboard beneath her father's bed, where he'd sometimes hidden small presents before birthdays or Christmas. I have an idea, she said, rising from the table. But first, we need to get back to the harvest. If Blackwood can foreclose at any time, we need to have that wheat in and sold as quickly as possible. Noah nodded, understanding the practicality of her decision. The ground should be dry enough by now. We'll work until sunset. As they returned to the fields, Sarah felt a strange mixture of fear and determination. The stakes had grown higher than just saving her family farm. There were deeper currents at work, old wrongs seeking justice, secrets waiting to be uncovered. And through it all, the golden wheat awaited harvest, indifferent to human concerns, responsive only to the inexorable rhythm of seasons and weather. They would save what they could, while they could, and face whatever came afterward together. The days that followed took on a heightened urgency. Sarah and Noah worked from first light until dusk, their bodies aching with effort, their minds focused on the single goal of completing the harvest before Blackwood could act on his threats. They had fallen into an efficient partnership, each anticipating the other's movements and needs. Despite the lingering questions between them, their work in the fields flowed with a harmony that spoke of deeper understanding. Sarah found herself watching Noah when his attention was elsewhere. The capable movements of his hands, the quiet determination in his profile, the occasional smile that transformed his serious face. One evening, as they cleaned and stored tools in the barn, Sarah broached the subject that had been weighing on her mind. "Tell me about the fire," she said quietly. "The night my mother died. What did you see?" Noah set down the whetstone he'd been using to sharpen the scythe. In the lantern light, his face was solemn. "I was camping by the creek about a mile from here," he began. "Saw the flames and rode toward them. By the time I arrived, the barn was fully engulfed." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "There were neighbors forming a bucket line, trying to keep the fire from spreading to the house. Your father he was trying to get into the burning building. It took 3 men to hold him back." Sarah closed her eyes, the scene all too vivid in her imagination. "I should have been here." "You can't blame yourself, Sarah. From what I heard that night, the fire spread with unnatural speed. Even if you had been home, you couldn't have saved her." "Unnatural speed?" Sarah opened her eyes, focusing on his choice of words. "What do you mean?" Noah hesitated. "Some of the men were saying it was strange how quickly the barn went up. Almost as if it had help," Sarah finished, a cold realization dawning. "You think it wasn't an accident?" "I didn't say that," Noah cautioned. "But looking back now, knowing what we suspect about Blackwood." Sarah sank onto a nearby crate, the implications staggering. "If Blackwood wanted our land then as much as he does now, and if Pa had evidence against him from the war—" "It's speculation," Noah reminded her. "We have no proof." "We need to find Pa's hiding places," Sarah said decisively. "Tonight, after supper." That evening they searched Howard Mitchell's small study methodically, checking behind books, under floorboards, inside the old roll-top desk. They found nothing unusual, just the normal accumulation of a farmer's life. Receipts, seed catalogs, letters from distant relatives. "Let's try the bedroom," Sarah suggested, leading the way to her father's room. The master bedroom was simply furnished: a 4-poster bed, a chest of drawers, a small table with a Bible atop it. Sarah knelt beside the bed, feeling along the floorboards until she found the one that gave slightly under pressure. Using a letter opener, she pried up the board to reveal a small cavity beneath. "Here," she murmured, reaching inside. Her fingers touched something cool and metallic, a small tin box. She withdrew it, setting it on the bed as Noah brought the lamp closer. The box was locked, but the key hung on a string around its handle. Inside, they found several folded documents, a leather pouch, and a daguerreotype photograph of a beautiful dark-haired woman who was not Elizabeth Mitchell. "Who is she?" Noah asked, studying the photograph. Sarah shook her head, equally puzzled. "I've never seen her before." She unfolded one of the documents, a letter written in elegant, feminine handwriting. "My dearest Howard, I understand why we cannot be together, though it breaks my heart. Your duty to your family must come first. Know that I will always cherish what we shared, brief though it was. If fate is kind, perhaps our paths will cross again in happier times. With eternal love." Margaret Sarah read the letter twice, her hands trembling slightly. "Pa had a sweetheart before my mother." She looked up at Noah. "Did he ever mention someone named Margaret?" "No," Noah replied. "But remember, I only knew your father briefly, during the worst of circumstances." Sarah examined the other contents of the box. More letters from Margaret spanning several years. The last dated 1863, during the height of the war. The leather pouch contained a simple gold ring, never worn. "It appears they loved each other deeply," Noah observed, "but never married." "Pa never spoke of her," Sarah said, a strange sadness filling her for this unknown chapter in her father's life. "I wonder what happened between them." The final item in the box was a sealed envelope marked simply, "In case of my untimely death." Sarah broke the seal with trembling fingers, unfolding a single sheet of paper inside. Rather than a letter, she found a hand-drawn map of the Mitchell property with a specific location marked by an X near the old oak tree at the north boundary. Below the map was a sequence of numbers and letters that made no immediate sense. "It's some kind of code," Noah said, peering over her shoulder. "Pa was in intelligence," Sarah remembered. "He would have known ciphers. Can you decipher it?" Sarah studied the sequence. "Maybe. He taught me a simple substitution code when I was a child. We used it to write secret messages to each other when I was learning my letters." She took a pencil from the bedside table and began working on a separate sheet of paper, testing different letter combinations. After several minutes, she sat back with a triumphant smile. "I think I have it. Beneath the oldest roots lies the truth about the blackest wood." Noah raised an eyebrow. "Blackwood, it has to be about Joseph. And the oldest roots must refer to the oak tree on the map," Sarah concluded. "We need to dig there." They exchanged a look of shared purpose. "Tomorrow," Noah said. "First light before we start the day's harvesting." Sarah nodded, carefully returning the letters and photograph to the box, but keeping the map and coded message. As she replaced the floorboard, she felt a confusing mixture of emotions. Sadness for the love her father had lost, curiosity about the mysterious Margaret, and a growing anticipation about what they might find beneath the old oak tree. Before retiring for the night, she paused at the door to her father's bedroom. "Noah," she said quietly, "thank you for helping with this, for believing me about Blackwood." Noah's gaze was steady in the lamplight. "Your father saved my life, Sarah. Helping you now is the least I can do to honor that debt." Sarah studied him, sensing there was more he wasn't saying. "Is that the only reason you're still here? A debt to my father?" For a moment, something unguarded and vulnerable flashed in Noah's eyes. But before he could answer, they heard the distant sound of horses approaching. Multiple riders, coming fast. Noah moved swiftly to the window. "Riders, 3 of them." His voice sharpened. "It's Blackwood." Sarah felt a surge of fear. What would he want at this hour? "Nothing good," Noah replied grimly. "Hide the map and cipher. I'll meet them outside." "No," Sarah said firmly. "This is my home. We'll face them together." As they stepped onto the porch, Joseph Blackwood and 2 rough-looking men reined in their horses in the yard. Blackwood wore an expensive riding coat despite the summer evening, his manner that of a man accustomed to deference. "Miss Mitchell," he called, his voice falsely cordial. "I apologize for the late hour, but I've come on urgent business." "What business would that be, Mr. Blackwood?" Sarah's voice was cool, though her heart raced. Blackwood dismounted, handing his reins to one of his companions. "I've purchased your father's loan from the bank, as you may have heard. In reviewing the terms, I discovered a clause allowing immediate collection under certain circumstances." He produced a document from his coat pocket, "such as harboring a known criminal on the property." Noah stepped forward, his stance protective. "I'm no criminal, Blackwood." Blackwood's eyes narrowed as he studied Noah. "Mr. Winters, isn't it? A drifter with a questionable past." His gaze sharpened suddenly. Have we met before? You seem familiar. I don't believe so, Noah replied evenly. No matter. Blackwood turned back to Sarah. The point stands. Your arrangement with this itinerant violates the terms of your loan. I'm within my rights to demand immediate payment in full. Sarah felt cold fury rising within her. That's absurd. There's no such clause in our agreement. Perhaps your father didn't share all the details with you, my dear. Blackwood's smile was reptilian. I have the documentation right here. The full amount is due within 3 days, or the property reverts to me. This is a transparent attempt to steal my farm, Sarah said, her voice shaking with anger. We both know I can't raise that kind of money in 3 days. Then perhaps you should reconsider my offer to purchase the land, Blackwood suggested smoothly. I'm still willing to pay a fair price. Your idea of fair and mine differ greatly, Mr. Blackwood, Sarah replied coldly. Blackwood's facade of politeness slipped, revealing a harder edge. Don't be foolish, girl. You can't win this fight. His gaze flicked to Noah. And your protector here won't be around long enough to help you. Noah took a step forward. Is that a threat? Merely an observation. Blackwood remounted his horse. 3 days, Miss Mitchell. Then this land is mine. He tipped his hat mockingly. Good evening to you both. As the 3 riders departed, Sarah and Noah remained on the porch, watching until they disappeared down the road. He's bluffing about the loan terms, Sarah said finally. He has to be. Probably, Noah agreed. But that doesn't mean he can't make trouble. Men like Blackwood usually find a way to get what they want. Yashaji hugged herself against a sudden chill. We need to find whatever's buried under that oak tree. If my father had evidence against Blackwood, it might not be enough, Noah cautioned. Blackwood has money and influence. Evidence from 10 years ago might not carry much weight now. It's all we have, Sarah replied quietly. That and the harvest. If we can get the wheat in and sold before his 3 days are up, I might be able to pay enough of the loan to negotiate with another bank. Noah nodded, his expression resolute. Then we better get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. As Sarah lay in bed that night, sleep eluded her. Too many questions swirled in her mind. Who was Margaret, and what had happened between her and Howard? What evidence had her father hidden beneath the oak tree? And Noah, what wasn't he telling her about his connection to all of this? Through her window, she could see the storage shed where Noah slept. A faint light flickered inside. He was awake too, perhaps wrestling with his own demons. Sarah turned her gaze to the stars visible beyond the glass. The same stars her parents had looked upon. The same stars that had witnessed the war that connected Noah and her father. Somewhere in all of this, there was a truth waiting to be uncovered. Tomorrow they would take the first step toward finding it. Dawn found Sarah and Noah beneath the ancient oak tree that marked the northern boundary of the Mitchell property. The massive tree, its trunk gnarled with age, had stood sentinel for generations, its branches spreading wide to create a natural canopy. Using the map Howard had left, they located the exact spot to dig, near the largest exposed root on the eastern side of the trunk. Noah worked the shovel, breaking through the hard-packed earth while Sarah kept watch for any sign of Blackwood or his men. How deep do you think it is? Sarah asked, after Noah had excavated a pit nearly 2 feet down. Can't be too deep, Noah replied, wiping sweat from his brow despite the early hour. Your father would have wanted it accessible but secure. A few more shovelfuls of dirt, and the blade of the shovel struck something metallic. Noah dropped to his knees, using his hands to clear away the remaining soil. A small iron box emerged from the earth, its surface rusted but intact. A simple padlock secured the lid. We'll need to break it open, Sarah said, examining the lock. I don't think Pa would have left the key where anyone could find it. Noah retrieved a hammer from the tools they'd brought and, with a few precise blows, broke the aged lock. They exchanged a glance of anticipation before Sarah lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth to protect from moisture, was a stack of documents in a small leather-bound notebook. Sarah carefully unwrapped the package, spreading the contents on the ground beside the pit. The notebook proved to be another of Howard's journals. This one focused exclusively on his intelligence work during the war. Sarah flipped through pages of observations, coded messages, and reports, stopping when she reached entries from April 1865. Here, she said, pointing to a passage. He writes about suspecting an officer of selling information to the Confederates. He was tracking financial transactions, unusual communications. She turned the page. And here, a name in code, but it's clearly Blackwood when you apply the cipher. Noah examined the other documents, military orders, maps with annotations, and most damning of all, a copy of a bank draft showing a substantial payment to Joseph Blackwood from a known Confederate sympathizer, dated just days before the ambush that had nearly killed Noah. "This is it," Noah said quietly, "proof that Blackwood was a traitor." "But will it matter after all this time?" Sarah wondered. "The war's been over for 11 years. "Treason doesn't expire," Noah replied. "And if Blackwood used his wartime profits to build his current fortune, that wealth was gained through blood money." As they continued examining the documents, Sarah found a folded letter addressed simply to the survivor. With a sense of foreboding, she opened it and began to read. "To whoever finds this evidence, if you are reading this, I am likely dead, possibly by unnatural causes. The man named in these documents, Joseph Blackwood, is responsible for the deaths of 8 good men and the wounding of 3 others. He betrayed his oath, his country, and his fellow soldiers for financial gain. I have kept this evidence hidden because Blackwood has powerful friends and I have a family to protect. But justice demands that his crimes eventually come to light. One witness remains who can testify to Blackwood's treason. Margaret Winters, who served as a nurse with our unit and intercepted one of Blackwood's communications. She now resides in Helena, Montana, where she operates a small dry goods store. May God guide this information into the right hands. Captain Howard Mitchell, 10th Montana Infantry." Sarah looked up from the letter, her mind reeling. "Margaret Winters," she repeated. "The woman from the letters. Pa's sweetheart." Noah had gone very still, his face pale. "Did you say Margaret Winters?" Sarah nodded, studying his reaction with growing suspicion. "You recognize the name." Noah's gaze dropped to the ground, his shoulders suddenly heavy with what seemed like the weight of years. "Margaret Winters," he said quietly, "is my mother." The revelation hung in the air between them. Sarah stared at Noah, pieces falling into place with dizzying speed. "Your mother was my father's sweetheart? And you never thought to mention this?" Her voice rose with disbelief. "I didn't know," Noah said quickly. "Not until now. I knew my mother had served as a nurse during the war, knew she had some connection to Montana that she rarely spoke about, but she never told me about Howard Mitchell." He ran a hand through his hair, visibly struggling with the revelation. "She gave me my stepfather's name, Winters. I never questioned it." "But you came here looking for my father," Sarah pressed. "You must have had some idea." "I came looking for the Captain Thomas who saved my life," Noah insisted. "I had no idea he might have had a connection to my mother before the war." Sarah wasn't sure she believed him. It seemed too coincidental, too convenient. "So you expect me to believe that you, the son of my father's former sweetheart, just happened to arrive at our farm right after he died? That you had no idea of their past relationship?" Noah met her gaze steadily. "I swear to you, Sarah, I didn't know. But it explains why my mother became so quiet when I mentioned coming to Montana to find Captain Mitchell. She must have realized who he was." Sarah stood, gathering the documents with trembling hands. "We should get back. There's harvesting to be done. And now we need to find a way to get these documents to someone who can act on them. A judge, perhaps." "Sarah," Noah began, reaching for her arm. She pulled away. "Don't. I need time to process this." Her voice softened slightly at the genuine distress in his eyes. "We'll talk later. Right now, the wheat can't wait." They walked back to the farmhouse in silence, each lost in private thoughts. The morning sun climbed higher, promising another hot day perfect for harvesting. Despite the momentous discovery beneath the oak tree, the practical demands of the farm remained unchanged. As they stored the documents safely in the house and prepared for the day's work, Sarah couldn't help watching Noah with new eyes. Was he truly as surprised by the connection between their families as he claimed? Or had he come to the Mitchell farm with hidden motives, using the harvest as an excuse to search for something else entirely? Trust, so tentatively built between them over the past weeks, now felt fragile as a wheat stalk in a storm. Yet they had no choice but to continue working together if they hoped to save the farm, and perhaps find justice for the dead of both the ambush and the fire that had claimed Elizabeth Mitchell's life. By mid-afternoon, the temperature had soared, the sun beating down mercilessly on the wheat fields. Sarah and Noah worked steadily, speaking only when necessary about the task at hand. The air between them was heavy with unspoken questions, complicated further by the physical demands of the harvest. They had nearly completed another section when Sarah spotted a buggy approaching along the road. She straightened, wiping sweat from her brow as she recognized Reverend Thompson's vehicle. "The minister's coming," she called to Noah. "I'd forgotten he was joining us for dinner tomorrow." "Not today." Noah nodded, continuing to cut wheat with the cradle scythe. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his forearms tanned and corded with muscle from weeks of labor. Despite her confusion and suspicion, Sarah couldn't help noticing the fluid strength of his movements, the total absorption with which he approached even this grueling work. Reverend Thompson pulled up to the edge of the field, raising a hand in greeting. "Miss Mitchell, Mr. Winters, my apologies for the unexpected visit." They made their way to the fence line, Noah hanging back slightly as Sarah greeted the minister. "What brings you out here today, Reverend? I thought we were expecting you tomorrow." "Indeed you were," the minister replied, his usually serene face troubled. "But I felt I should warn you, Joseph Blackwood has been to see Judge Parker. He's filed formal papers to foreclose on your property, claiming breach of loan terms." Sarah felt a cold weight settle in her stomach despite the summer heat. "Can he do that so quickly?" "I'm afraid so. Blackwood has considerable influence with the bank's directors." The Reverend hesitated. "There's more, I'm sorry to say. He's also made accusations against Mr. Winters here, claims of theft and fraud in another county. The sheriff is considering whether to bring him in for questioning." Noah stepped forward, his face grim. "These are false charges, Reverend. Blackwood is trying to intimidate us." "I believed as much," Reverend Thompson replied. "But why would he target you specifically, Mr. Winters? What does he fear from your presence here?" Sarah and Noah exchanged a look. Should they share their discovery? The evidence of Blackwood's treason? The minister was respected in the community, known for his integrity. If anyone could help them navigate the situation, it might be him. "Reverend," Sarah said carefully, "if we showed you something in confidence, something that might explain Blackwood's actions, would you be willing to advise us?" The minister's eyes showed curiosity and concern. "Of course, my child. My door and my counsel are always open to you." "Not here," Noah cautioned, glancing toward the road. "We should speak privately." They retired to the shade of the farmhouse porch, where Sarah retrieved the documents from their hiding place. As Reverend Thompson examined the evidence of Blackwood's wartime treachery, his expression grew increasingly grave. "This is most disturbing," he said finally, setting aside Howard's journal. "If authentic, and I have no reason to doubt Captain Mitchell's word, these documents implicate Mr. Blackwood in serious crimes." "Treason in the deaths of 8 soldiers," Noah confirmed, "and possibly more." Sarah leaned forward. "We believe he may also be responsible for the fire that killed my mother 5 years ago. If my father had this evidence even then—" Reverend Thompson nodded slowly. "It would give Blackwood motive to silence him, certainly." He stroked his gray beard thoughtfully. "But proving such a connection after all this time would be difficult." "What about the treason charges?" Noah asked. "Surely that evidence is clear enough." "Clear to us, perhaps, but in a court of law?" The minister sighed. "You would need more than these documents. You would need testimony from someone who witnessed Blackwood's actions firsthand." "Margaret Winters," Sarah said. "My father mentioned her in his letter. She intercepted one of Blackwood's communications. And she happens to be my mother," Noah added quietly. Reverend Thompson's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Indeed, that is quite a coincidence." "One I only learned of this morning," Noah assured him. "My mother never spoke of her connection to Captain Mitchell or her role in the war." The Reverend studied Noah with new interest. "Where is your mother now, Mr. Winters?" "Helena, according to the letter. She runs a dry goods store there." "A day's ride," Reverend Thompson mused. "Someone would need to bring her back here to testify before Judge Parker." He turned to Sarah. "But that still leaves the immediate problem of the foreclosure. Blackwood has set the hearing for 3 days from now." Sarah felt desperation rising within her. "We've harvested nearly half the wheat. If we could sell what we've cut so far, perhaps we could make a partial payment. Buy more time. I could speak to Judge Parker, the minister offered, explain the circumstances, ask for a postponement. He's a fair man, though he respects the law. And I could ride to Helena, Noah suggested. Find my mother, bring her back to testify against Blackwood. Sarah weighed their options. They needed both approaches, legal delay through Judge Parker and the damning testimony Margaret Winters could provide. But the thought of Noah leaving, even temporarily, sent a pang of anxiety through her. Not just because she needed his help with the harvest, but because she pushed the thought aside. This wasn't the time for confusing feelings. I'll keep harvesting while you're gone, she told Noah. Every sheaf we bring in is another step towards saving the farm. Reverend Thompson cleared his throat. There's one more thing you should consider. If Blackwood truly is behind these crimes, he won't hesitate to silence anyone who threatens him, including both of you and Mrs. Winters. You must proceed with utmost caution. Noah's expression hardened. I won't let him hurt my mother or Sarah. Prayer is always wise, the minister advised, but in this case, practical precautions are equally important. He turned to Sarah. Perhaps you shouldn't stay here alone while Mr. Winters is gone. Mrs. Summers might— No, Sarah interrupted firmly. This is my home. I won't be driven from it by fear. She straightened her shoulders. Besides, I have my father's shotgun, and I know how to use it. The Reverend looked as though he might object, but something in Sarah's determined expression made him reconsider. Very well. I'll speak to Judge Parker first thing tomorrow. Mr. Winters, when do you plan to leave for Helena? At first light, Noah replied. If I ride hard, I can be there by nightfall, find my mother, and start back the following morning. Then we should pray together before I go, Reverend Thompson suggested. For safety, wisdom, and justice. Well, they bowed their heads as the minister offered a simple, heartfelt prayer. When he finished, he clasped Sarah's hands in his. Have faith, child. Your father was a good man who stood for truth. That legacy lives on in you. After the Reverend departed, Sarah and Noah returned to the fields, working until the fading light made harvesting impossible. They moved in tandem, their earlier tension partially dissolved by the shared purpose of confronting Blackwood's schemes. As they stored the tools for the night, Noah paused, leaning on the scythe handle. Sarah, about tomorrow. You need to find your mother, she finished for him. I understand. I don't like leaving you here alone, especially now that Blackwood knows we're on to him. Sarah managed a small smile. I've faced worse than Joseph Blackwood. Noah studied her face in the gathering twilight. You have, haven't you? You're stronger than anyone I've ever met, Sarah Mitchell. The simple sincerity in his voice touched something deep within her. For weeks, they had worked side by side, sharing meals and conversation, gradually building a connection neither had anticipated. Despite the revelations and complications of the day, that connection remained, perhaps even deepened by shared purpose. Noah, Sarah began, uncertain what she wanted to say, only knowing that his imminent departure created an urgency she hadn't expected to feel. Before she could continue, the stillness of the evening was shattered by the sound of breaking glass from the direction of the house. They exchanged an alarmed glance before running toward the noise. The kitchen window had been broken, a rock lying amid the shattered glass on the floor. Wrapped around the rock was a piece of paper secured with twine. Noah picked it up carefully, unwinding the message. Sell while you still can, he read aloud. Next time it won't be just a window. Sarah felt a chill despite the warm evening. Blackwood. Noah's expression darkened as he examined the broken window. He's escalating. First threats, now vandalism. He's trying to frighten me into selling before we can expose him, Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. It won't work, Noah assured her, his hand finding hers in the dimness of the kitchen. We'll stop him, Sarah. Together. His palm was warm against hers, calloused from weeks of farm work, yet somehow gentle. Sarah found herself drawing strength from his touch, from the unwavering conviction in his voice. Together, she repeated, and in that moment she chose to trust him, not blindly but with open eyes to both the risks and possibilities that lay ahead. Night descended over the Mitchell farm, bringing with it a stillness broken only by the occasional cry of a night bird or the rustle of wind through the wheat fields. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, her father's shotgun across her lap as she watched the repaired window. After discovering the rock, Noah had quickly fashioned a temporary repair using a spare board and nails, promising to replace the glass properly upon his return. Return. The word echoed in Sarah's mind as she contemplated the empty house around her. Just weeks ago, she had been alone and desperate after her father's death. Now, the thought of Noah's absence, even for a few days, left her feeling strangely adrift. She rose, moving restlessly through the rooms where generations of Mitchells had lived and dreamed. This house, this land, it was more than property. It was her heritage, her identity. To lose it to a man like Blackwood would be to lose a part of herself. A soft knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. Sarah raised the shotgun, approaching cautiously. "Who's there?" she called. "It's me." Noah's voice came through the door, low and reassuring. She unlocked the door to find him standing on the porch, his face shadowed in the darkness. "Is everything all right?" she asked, noting the tension in his posture. "Fine, just wanted to check on you before I finish preparations for tomorrow." Noah glanced past her at the shotgun. "Good, keep that close." "I will." Sarah hesitated, then asked, "Would you like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." Noah seemed about to refuse, then nodded. "Thank you, that would be welcome." Inside, he sat at the kitchen table while Sarah poured 2 cups of the strong black brew. The lamplight cast his features in sharp relief, highlighting the scar on his cheek and the lines of weariness around his eyes. "What will you tell her?" Sarah asked suddenly. "Your mother, when you see her." Noah's fingers tightened around the coffee cup. "The truth, that I found Howard Mitchell's family, that we need her help to stop Blackwood." He paused. "That I know she loved your father once." Sarah studied him across the table. "Do you think she still does? Love him, I mean." "I don't know. She never spoke of him." Noah's gaze grew distant. "My mother is private, reserved. She raised me alone until I was 10, then married John Winters. He was a good man, gave me his name, taught me farming." A shadow crossed his face. "He died in the drought of '67, same time we lost the farm." "I'm sorry," Sarah said softly. "That must have been difficult for both of you." Noah nodded. "It was, but my mother is strong like you." He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "You remind me of her sometimes. The same determination." The comparison touched Sarah unexpectedly. "I wish I could meet her, regardless of what happened between her and my father." "You will," Noah promised, "when I bring her back to testify against Blackwood." He set down his cup. "There's something else you should know, Sarah. Something I haven't told you." Sarah tensed, prepared for another revelation. "What is it?" "The night your mother died in the fire, I didn't just help with the bucket line." Noah's voice dropped lower. "I saw someone leaving the scene, a man on horseback, riding away from the back of the property while everyone was focused on the flames." "Blackwood?" Sarah whispered, a chill running through her despite the warm evening. "I can't be certain. It was dark and I only caught a glimpse." Noah's expression was grim. "But whoever it was, they were in a hurry to leave unseen." "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because until we found your father's evidence, I had no context for it. No reason to connect a random rider with the fire." Noah reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. "I'm telling you now because I want you to understand the kind of man we're dealing with. If Blackwood is behind both the ambush and your mother's death, he won't hesitate to strike again." "You're trying to frighten me," Sarah realized. "To make me more cautious." "Yes," Noah admitted without apology. "Your safety matters to me, Sarah. More than I expected when I first arrived here." The simple declaration hung in the air between them, neither quite ready to examine its full meaning. Instead, Sarah rose to refill their cups, using the moment to compose herself. "I'll be careful," she promised, "but I won't hide in fear either. This farm needs tending, especially with you gone. Just don't work alone in the far fields. Stay within sight of the house where neighbors might see you." Noah drank his coffee, then set the cup down decisively. "I should go. Need to be on the road before dawn if I'm to reach Helena by nightfall." At the door, he turned back to her, hesitation evident in his stance. "Sarah, no matter what happens with Blackwood, with the farm, I want you to know that meeting you, working alongside you these past weeks, has meant more to me than I can express. Before Sarah could respond, Noah stepped forward and gently touched her cheek, the brief contact sending warmth cascading through here. Then he was gone, disappearing into the darkness toward the storage shed where he'd prepared his horse for the early morning journey. Sarah closed the door, her hand rising unconsciously to the spot where his fingers had touched her skin. Outside, the moon sailed through scattered clouds, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow across the ripening wheat fields. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for tonight, she allowed herself to acknowledge the growing feeling that Noah Winters had become far more to her than just a hired hand or even an ally against Blackwood. He had become essential in ways that both thrilled and terrified her. Dawn broke with bands of pink and gold stretching across the eastern sky. Sarah stood on the porch, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the morning chill, watching as Noah saddled his horse. He worked efficiently, checking the cinch and adjusting his small pack of provisions. "There's bread and cheese in there," Sarah said, indicating the cloth-wrapped bundle she'd added to his saddlebags, and some of yesterday's apple pie. Noah smiled, the expression softening his usually serious face. "Thank you. Should make the journey more pleasant." "Be careful," Sarah cautioned him. "If Blackwood suspects where you're going—" "He won't," Noah assured her, mounting his horse with practiced ease despite his injured leg. "As far as anyone in town knows, I'm heading to the county seat to sell some of the early wheat." Sarah nodded, anxiety churning inside her despite his confidence. "How will I know if something happens?" "I'll send word with the stagecoach driver if I'm delayed." Noah gathered the reins. "But I will return, Sarah, with my mother and the evidence to stop Blackwood." "I believe you," Sarah said, and realized she meant it. Despite the revelations and complications of recent days, she had come to trust Noah Winters. He tipped his hat to her, then urged his horse forward. Sarah watched until horse and rider disappeared over the rise, then turned back to the empty house. The day stretched ahead, filled with tasks that couldn't wait despite Noah's absence and her own worries. After a quick breakfast, Sarah headed to the barn to fetch the smaller scythe. She couldn't manage the larger cradle scythe Noah used, but she could at least continue binding the sheaves he had already cut and perhaps harvest a small section herself. The morning passed in a blur of physical labor. Without Noah's help, the work progressed much more slowly, but Sarah found a grim satisfaction in the steady rhythm of cutting and binding. Each completed sheaf was another small victory against Blackwood's threats. Around midday, she paused to drink from the water jug, wiping sweat from her brow. The sound of approaching hooves made her tense, her hand moving instinctively to the pocket where she'd stowed her father's small revolver. Relief washed over her as she recognized Edith Summers in her familiar wagon, accompanied by her eldest son Robert, a broad-shouldered man in his 30s. "Sarah Mitchell," Edith called as she pulled the wagon to a stop. "What in heaven's name are you doing out here alone in this heat?" "The wheat won't harvest itself," Sarah replied, managing a smile despite her exhaustion. "Where's your hired man?" Robert asked, jumping down from the wagon. "Gone to fetch help against Blackwood," Sarah explained, seeing no reason to hide the truth from trusted neighbors. Edith's eyes narrowed. "So that snake is making his move, is he?" "Well, he won't find it so easy." She nodded to her son. "Robert, get your scythe from the wagon." "What are you doing?" Sarah asked, confusion giving way to grateful understanding as Robert retrieved a cradle scythe similar to Noah's. "Neighbors help neighbors," Edith stated simply. "Howard Mitchell helped us plenty when Robert's father passed. Time to return the favor." "I can't ask you to—" "You didn't ask," Edith interrupted firmly. "We're offering. Now, I'm too old for scything, but I can bind with the best of them. Robert will cut, you and I will bind, and we'll see how much we can get done before sundown." Tears pricked at Sarah's eyes, the unexpected kindness penetrating the armor of self-reliance she'd worn since her father's death. "Thank you," she managed. "Thank you both." Edith waved away her gratitude. "Save your thanks for when the wheat's in. Now let's get to work before the day's wasted." With Robert's strong arms swinging the scythe and two pairs of hands binding, they made remarkable progress throughout the afternoon. By the time shadows lengthened across the field, they had harvested nearly as much as Sarah and Noah would have in a full day. "You'll come stay with us tonight," Edith announced as they stored the tools in the barn. "It's not safe for you here alone." Sarah shook her head firmly. "I appreciate the offer, but I need to stay. This is my home, and I won't be driven from it by fear. Edith studied her face, then sighed. Stubborn as your father. Very well, but Robert will check on you in the morning. And take this. She handed Sarah a small brass bell. Ring it hard if there's trouble. Sound carries across the valley at night, and will come running. After the Sommers departed, Sarah secured the house for the night, checking that doors and windows were locked and her father's shotgun was loaded. She made a simple supper, trying not to notice how quiet the kitchen seemed without Noah's presence. As darkness fell, Sarah sat on the porch despite the risk, unwilling to surrender the simple pleasure of the evening air to Blackwood's threats. The wheat fields stretched before her, silvered by moonlight, rippling gently in the night breeze. So much beauty, so much history in this land, her land. A movement at the edge of her vision made her stiffen. Something or someone had darted between the barn and the storage shed. Sarah reached for the shotgun beside her, rising slowly to her feet. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steadier than she felt. No answer came, but she was certain she'd seen movement. Heart pounding, Sarah considered her options. She could retreat inside, secure behind locked doors. Or she could investigate, confront whatever threat lurked in the darkness. Howard Mitchell's daughter was not one to hide. Shotgun raised, Sarah descended the porch steps and moved cautiously toward the barn. The waxing moon provided enough light to navigate, but cast deep shadows where anyone could conceal themselves. "I'm armed," she announced to the darkness. "Show yourself." A rustling sound came from inside the barn, followed by a crash as something metallic fell to the floor. Sarah approached the partially open barn door, her finger tense on the trigger. "Last warning," she called. "Come out now!" A figure burst from the barn, rushing toward her. Sarah raised the shotgun, then lowered it in shock as lamplight from the house illuminated the intruder's face. "Mrs. Winters?" The woman before her was perhaps in her early 60s, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. Despite her obvious fright, she carried herself with dignity, her spine straight as a ramrod. "Are you Sarah Mitchell?" the woman asked, her voice cultured and surprisingly steady. "I am," Sarah confirmed, lowering the shotgun completely. "And you're Noah's mother, Margaret Winters?" "Yes." Margaret's shrewd eyes assessed Sarah quickly. "You look like him, Howard, the same determination in your face. How did you get here?" "Noah left this morning to find you in Helena." "We must have passed each other on different roads." Margaret glanced nervously toward the darkness beyond the barn. "I left as soon as I received word that Noah was here. A friend in town mentioned he'd been asking after Howard Mitchell's farm." "Come inside," Sarah urged, suddenly aware of how exposed they were. "It's not safe out here." In the kitchen, Margaret removed her traveling cloak, revealing a simple but well-made dress of deep blue. Though clearly exhausted from her journey, she maintained a certain elegance that spoke of a different life than the frontier existence Sarah knew. "You've met my son," Margaret stated, as Sarah poured her a cup of tea. "Yes, he's been helping with the harvest." Sarah studied the older woman's face, searching for resemblance to Noah. She found it in the shape of the eyes and the determined set of the jaw. "He didn't know, did he, about you and my father?" Margaret's hands tightened around her teacup. "No, I never told him." Her gaze met Sarah's directly. "Howard and it was before the war, before he met your mother. We were young and in love, but his family disapproved. I had no dowry, no connections." "So you parted," Sarah said softly, "but you met again during the war." "Yes, I was a nurse with the Union Army. Howard was in intelligence." A shadow crossed Margaret's face. "By then he was married to your mother. He was honorable. Never gave me reason to hope for more than friendship. But the feelings remained, at least on my part." "And Noah? Is he—" Sarah hesitated, unsure how to ask the question delicately. "Howard's son." Margaret shook her head. "No, Noah was born 2 years before I met Howard. His father was my first husband, who died when Noah was an infant." Relief washed through Sarah, surprising her with its intensity. The thought of Noah being her half-brother had been more disturbing than she wanted to examine. "Noah doesn't know I'm here," Margaret continued, "but when I heard he was at the Mitchell farm, I knew I had to come. I feared Joseph Blackwood might have found him." Sarah set down her cup with a sharp click. "You know Blackwood?" "I know what he is," Margaret replied, her voice hardening. "A traitor, a murderer. I intercepted a message he sent to Confederate intelligence. Names, positions, patrol routes. Her hands trembled slightly. 8 men died in the ambush that followed. Noah was gravely wounded. And my father saved him, Sarah said quietly. Margaret nodded. Howard carried him from the field under fire, then tracked down the source of the intelligence leak. Her eyes met Sarah's. He found proof it was Blackwood, but by then the war was ending. Blackwood had powerful friends. Howard feared for his family's safety if he pursued charges. So he kept the evidence hidden, Sarah concluded. But Blackwood must have suspected. That's why he's so determined to get our land. He thinks the proof is buried somewhere on the property. And is it? Margaret asked sharply. It was. We found it yesterday under the old oak tree. Noah has gone to Helena to find you, to bring you back to testify. Margaret closed her eyes briefly. Then he's in danger. Blackwood has men watching the roads. If he suspects Noah is carrying evidence or seeking witnesses, a cold weight settled in Sarah's stomach. We have to warn him. How? He's already hours away. Sarah rose, pacing the small kitchen as she considered options. Reverend Thompson, he's going to the county seat tomorrow to speak with Judge on Parker. He might be able to send word or even go to Helena himself. If there's a telegraph office, we could send a message ahead, Margaret suggested. Warn Noah to be cautious. The nearest telegraph is at the county seat, 30 miles away. Sarah glanced at the clock on the mantel. Too far to travel tonight, especially with Blackwood's men watching the roads. Margaret straightened her shoulders, a gesture so reminiscent of Noah that Sarah felt a pang of concern for him. Then we must prepare for his return, and for Blackwood's next move. What do you think he'll do? Blackwood is not a man to leave loose ends, Margaret said grimly. If he suspects you have evidence against him, he'll come for it, and for anyone who knows about it. Let him come, Sarah replied, her hand moving to the shotgun that still stood propped against the wall. This is Mitchell land, and I mean to defend it. A faint smile touched Margaret's lips. Howard would be proud of you, Sarah. He always valued courage above all else. The smile faded. But bravery alone won't stop Blackwood. We need strategy and allies. The Somers family helped with the harvest today. They'd come if there was trouble. Good, but we need more than just neighbors. Margaret thought for a moment. Is there a law officer nearby? Someone not under Blackwood's influence? Sheriff Taylor in town, but he's friendly with Blackwood. Sarah frowned, then brightened. But his deputy, James Foster, has no love for Blackwood. Rumor has it Blackwood tried to foreclose on his mother's property last year. Then Deputy Foster is our best hope for official support, Margaret decided. Can you get word to him without alerting Blackwood's men? Edith Summers could. She goes to town every morning for supplies, and no one would think twice about her stopping by the sheriff's office. Margaret nodded approval. Good. We'll send a message with her at first light. She glanced toward the window where darkness pressed against the glass. For tonight, we should take turns keeping watch. I don't think Blackwood would dare attack openly, but he might send someone to spy or steal the evidence. The documents are hidden where he won't find them, Sarah assured her, but you're right about keeping watch. She studied Margaret's tired face. You should rest first. You've had a long journey. Very well, but wake me in 4 hours to take my turn. As Margaret retired to the spare bedroom, Sarah returned to the porch, shotgun across her lap. The night was peaceful, stars scattered across the vast Montana sky. Somewhere out there, Noah was making his way to Helena, unaware that his mother was already here, that danger might be following him. Sarah whispered a prayer for his safety, surprised by the depth of emotion behind it. In just a few short weeks, Noah Winters had become essential to her in ways that went far beyond his help with the harvest. The thought of harm coming to him was unbearable. Come back safely, she murmured to the stars. Just come back. Noah Winters rode hard through the morning, pushing his horse as fast as he dared on the rough Montana roads. The landscape around him was breathtaking. Vast prairies giving way to rolling foothills, the distant mountains etched against the clear blue sky. But Noah had little attention to spare for the scenery. His thoughts remained fixed on the tasks ahead and the dangers behind. Would his mother believe him about Blackwood? Would she agree to testify about events a decade past? And most pressing of all, would Sarah be safe alone at the farm? He'd been reluctant to leave her, especially after the broken window made it clear Blackwood was escalating his intimidation. But finding Margaret Winters was their best hope of stopping Blackwood permanently, not just saving the Mitchell farm. By midday, Noah had covered nearly half the distance to Helena. He paused at a small creek to rest his horse and eat some of the provisions Sarah had packed. The apple pie was still moist and flavorful, the crust perfectly flaky. Noah savored each bite, remembering Sarah's hands carefully wrapping the bundle in the pre-dawn darkness. Those same capable hands that bound wheat sheaves, that cradled her father's shotgun with quiet confidence, that had trembled slightly when she spoke of fire. In the weeks since he'd arrived at the Mitchell farm, Noah had come to admire everything about Sarah, her strength, her determination, her compassion. What had begun as a simple desire to help Howard Mitchell's daughter had evolved into something far deeper, something Noah had neither expected nor sought. He was falling in love with her. The realization should have been shocking, but instead it settled in his mind with the rightness of a puzzle piece finding its place. Of course he loved her. How could he not? But would Sarah ever return such feelings? And what right did he have to hope for it, given the complications between their families and his own unspoken guilt? Noah remounted his horse, urging it back to the road with gentle pressure from his knees. Personal feelings would have to wait. First, they needed to deal with Blackwood and save the farm. The afternoon brought heavier traffic as Noah approached more populated areas. He passed freight wagons laden with goods, settlers in covered wagons heading west, and the occasional solitary rider like himself. Always he kept a watchful eye for anyone who might be following him or showing too much interest in his journey. It was near dusk when Noah crested a rise and saw Helena spread before him in the valley below. The town had grown significantly since his last visit years ago, with mining operations expanding up the gulch and businesses flourishing along the main streets. Somewhere in that bustle of activity was his mother's shop, and the answers he sought. Noah rode directly to Last Chance Gulch, the main thoroughfare where most businesses were located. As darkness fell, lanterns and gas lights illuminated storefronts and saloons. He scanned the signs until he found what he was seeking: Winter's Dry Goods and Notions. The shop was closed for the evening, a small sign in the window indicating business hours from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Noah continued down the street to the modest hotel where he secured a room for the night. After tending to his horse, he returned to his room to prepare for the morning's confrontation. What would he say to his mother? How could he explain his presence at the Mitchell farm, the evidence they'd found, the danger they now faced? And most difficult of all, how would he ask about her relationship with Howard Mitchell without seeming to judge her? Sleep came fitfully, dreams mixing memories of the war with images of Sarah standing alone against Blackwood. Noah woke before dawn, his body stiff from the long ride, but his mind clear on what must be done. He was waiting outside the dry goods store when his mother arrived to open for the day. Margaret Winters had aged since he'd last seen her 6 months ago, silver now outnumbering the dark in her carefully pinned hair. Yet she carried herself with the same quiet dignity he'd admired throughout his childhood. A woman who faced life's hardships without complaint or surrender. Noah. His name on her lips was part surprise, part resignation, as if she'd been expecting this day. "You're here early." "Mother." Noah removed his hat, suddenly uncertain how to proceed. The carefully planned speech evaporated from his mind. "I need to speak with you. It's important." Margaret studied his face, then nodded once. "Come in. We can talk before customers arrive." Inside, the store was meticulously organized, shelves stocked with everything from fabric and thread to cookware and dried goods. Margaret moved behind the counter, removing her shawl with practiced efficiency. "You've been at the Mitchell farm," she said before Noah could speak. It wasn't a question. Noah's surprise must have shown on his face, for she continued, "Helena may be growing, but news still travels. When a stranger named Winters starts asking after Howard Mitchell's family, word eventually reaches me." "Why didn't you tell me?" Noah asked, the question encompassing so much more than just her knowledge of his whereabouts. "About you and Howard Mitchell, about your history together." Margaret's hands stilled on the account book she'd been opening. "There was nothing to tell. Howard Mitchell was a man I knew briefly during the war, nothing more." "Mother," Noah said gently, "I know about your relationship before the war, about your role intercepting Blackwood's message." Margaret's face paled. How? We found Captain Mitchell's hidden documents, evidence against Blackwood, and a letter mentioning you as a witness. Noah paused. Sarah Mitchell and I found it together. His mother sank slowly onto the stool behind the counter. Sarah, she repeated. Howard's daughter. You've met her? Yes, I've been helping her bring in the harvest since her father died. Helping her? Margaret's shrewd eyes narrowed. Or watching over her? Noah sighed. Both, I suppose. I went there initially to pay my respects to the family of the man who saved my life. When I saw she was alone, struggling with the farm, I stayed. And now you've found evidence implicating Joseph Blackwood in wartime treason. Margaret's voice had taken on a brittle quality. And you want me to confirm it, to testify? Yes, Noah met her gaze directly. Blackwood is trying to steal Sarah's farm. He's already escalated to threats and vandalism. I believe he was behind the fire that killed Elizabeth Mitchell 5 years ago, and possibly Howard's recent death as well. So Howard is truly gone. Something flickered in Margaret's eyes. Grief, perhaps, or regret. I heard rumors, but hoped they were mistaken. You still cared for him, Noah realized. Margaret looked away. Some attachments never fully fade, even when circumstances make them impossible. She straightened her shoulders. But that's ancient history now. What matters is stopping Blackwood before he harms Sarah or you. Then you'll help? You'll testify about what you witnessed during the war? Of course I will, Margaret's voice sharpened. Did you think I wouldn't? That man's treachery cost 8 good men their lives and nearly took yours as well. I've waited years for a chance to see him brought to justice. Relief washed through Noah. Thank you. We need to return immediately. Blackwood has set a foreclosure hearing for tomorrow, and Sarah is alone at the farm. No, she isn't. Noah froze. What do you mean? I left for the Mitchell farm yesterday morning, as soon as I heard you were there. Margaret gathered her ledger and moved toward the back room. We must have passed each other on different roads. By now, I should be there with Sarah. A mixture of relief and new anxiety flooded Noah. Thank God she's not alone. But if Blackwood discovers you're both there with the evidence, all the more reason for us to hurry back, Margaret said firmly. Let me speak with my assistant about watching the store, then we can leave immediately. As his mother made arrangements for her absence, Noah found himself torn between worry for Sarah and gratitude that his mother had acted so decisively. The pieces were falling into place: Margaret's testimony, Howard's evidence, the connection to the fire that killed Elizabeth Mitchell. If they could get everything before Judge Parker in time, Blackwood's schemes would finally be exposed. But first, they had to reach the farm safely, and Noah couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Dawn broke over the Mitchell farm, painting the ripening wheat fields with golden light. Sarah stood on the porch, scanning the horizon for any sign of approaching riders. She had taken the final watch after Margaret relieved her around midnight, and the hours of solitary vigilance had given her ample time to consider their precarious situation. Blackwood wouldn't wait much longer. With the foreclosure hearing scheduled for tomorrow and Noah gone to Helena, the window for action was closing rapidly. If Sarah were in Blackwood's position, she would strike now while the farm was minimally defended. A movement on the road caught her attention, Edith Summers' wagon approaching at a brisk pace. Sarah waved, relieved to see the older woman had come as promised. Any trouble in the night? Edith called as she pulled the wagon to a stop. None, Sarah replied, descending the porch steps. But we have a visitor. She quickly explained Margaret's unexpected arrival and their need to get a message to Deputy Foster. Edith's eyes widened at the revelations about Blackwood. I always knew that man was no good, but treason and murder? That's far worse than I imagined. Will you speak to Deputy Foster for us? Sarah asked. Of course, James is a good boy, always had more sense than that fool of a sheriff he works for. Edith paused. But what will you do if Blackwood comes before help arrives? Defend what's ours, Sarah said simply. We have the evidence, Mrs. Winter's testimony, and enough ammunition to make Blackwood think twice about trying to take the farm by force. Edith shook her head. You're too much like your father, Sarah Mitchell, stubborn as an old mule. Despite her words, approval shone in the older woman's eyes. Robert and some of the other neighbors will be by later to help with the harvest. You won't face this alone. After Edith departed with their message for Deputy Foster, Sarah returned inside to find Margaret already dressed and preparing breakfast. The older woman moved about the kitchen with efficient grace, as if she'd been there many times before. "Your neighbor seems reliable," Margaret commented, setting a plate of eggs and bacon on the table. "Edith's the best," Sarah agreed, sitting down to the meal. "She and her son helped with the harvest yesterday." "Good. We'll need allies if Blackwood decides to take matters into his own hands." Margaret poured coffee for them both. "After breakfast, you can show me exactly what evidence you found in Howard's hidden box." As they ate, Sarah studied Noah's mother across the table. In the morning light, the resemblance between them was more apparent. The same determined set of the jaw, the same direct gaze that seemed to evaluate and assess. Yet where Noah's eyes held warmth beneath their watchfulness, Margaret's remained guarded, revealing little of her inner thoughts. "You love my father," Sarah said suddenly, the words escaping before she could reconsider. Margaret's cup paused halfway to her lips. "Yes," she answered simply. "Once, very much." "And when you met again during the war, even though he was married to my mother?" "I respected their marriage," Margaret replied, her tone even. "Howard was an honorable man. He loved your mother deeply. But you never married yourself until this John Winters that Noah mentioned?" A faint smile touched Margaret's lips. "Curious, aren't you, like Howard in that way?" She set down her cup. "No, I didn't marry until Noah was 10. I was waiting, I suppose, foolishly. Then I met John, who was kind and steady, who loved Noah as his own. It was enough." Sarah absorbed this, imagining the young woman who had loved and lost, who had carried that love through years of separation. "I'm sorry," she said finally, "that it couldn't be different for you and my father." "Life rarely gives us exactly what we want," Margaret replied without self-pity. "But it often provides what we need. I had Noah, a good career, eventually a kind husband." Her gaze sharpened. "And what of you and my son? I see the way you speak his name." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Noah has been essential to saving the farm, to everything." "Just the farm?" Margaret pressed gently. Before Sarah could formulate a response, a distant gunshot cracked through the morning stillness. Both women were on their feet instantly, moving to the window. "It came from the north field," Sarah said, reaching for the shotgun, "where Robert and the others would be coming from." "A warning shot, perhaps," Margaret suggested, her voice tense. "Or a signal." Another shot followed, then a third. Sarah was already moving toward the door. "Those aren't warnings. Someone's in trouble." "Wait," Margaret caught her arm. "It could be a trap. Blackwood might be trying to draw us out." Sarah hesitated, torn between caution and concern for her neighbors. Before she could decide, the sound of galloping hooves approached from the direction of the shots. Through the window, they saw Robert Summers' horse racing toward the house, its rider slumped forward in the saddle. "Robert!" Sarah wrenched open the door and ran to meet the horse as it skidded to a stop in the yard. Robert half fell from the saddle, blood staining his shirt from a wound in his shoulder. "Blackwood's men," he gasped as Sarah helped him toward the house. "Ambushed us on the north road. 4 or 5 of them." Margaret met them at the door, her expression grim but composed. "Inside, quickly. We need to tend that wound and secure the house." As Margaret cleaned and bandaged Robert's injury, Sarah gathered their weapons, her father's shotgun, the small revolver, and an old hunting rifle from the gun cabinet. "How bad is it?" she asked when Margaret joined her in the parlor. "The bullet went through clean. He'll heal with proper care." Margaret accepted the revolver Sarah offered. "But he's in no condition to fight. And if Blackwood's men attack the neighbors coming to help us, then they're coming here next," Sarah finished, her mouth set in a determined line. "For the evidence, and for us." "We should hide the documents," Margaret suggested. "Somewhere they won't think to look." Sarah nodded, retrieving the metal box from its hiding place behind a loose brick in the fireplace. Together they searched for a new location, finally settling on the hollow space beneath the floorboards of the kitchen pantry. "Even if they searched the house, they'd have to tear up every floor to find it," Sarah said with grim satisfaction. Margaret checked the revolver's chambers. "Now we prepare for their arrival. How many ways into the house?" "Front and back doors, windows on all sides, but they're small except for the front parlor. We'll need to cover all approaches." Margaret thought for a moment. The wounded young man can watch the back door from the kitchen. I'll take the upstairs bedroom with a view of the approach road. You cover the front door and parlor windows. Sarah was impressed by the older woman's tactical thinking. You've done this before. A shadow crossed Margaret's face. During the war, our field hospital was raided twice by Confederate raiders. We learned to defend ourselves. They positioned themselves as planned, each with a clear field of fire and simple signals to alert the others of approaching danger. The minutes stretched into an hour of tense waiting, the only sounds Robert's labored breathing from the kitchen and the occasional creak of the house settling. Just when Sarah began to wonder if they'd misinterpreted the attack on the neighbors, Margaret's voice called softly from upstairs. Riders approaching, 5 of them, coming fast. Sarah moved to the front window, staying to one side of the curtains. Through the glass, she could see 5 mounted men galloping toward the farm, rifles visible in their hands. Joseph Blackwood himself led the group, his expensive coat unmistakable, even at a distance. It's Blackwood, she confirmed, raising her shotgun, and his men. Hold your fire until they make their intentions clear, Margaret advised. If they've come to talk, they didn't shoot Robert because they wanted to talk, Sarah interrupted grimly. They're here to silence us and take the evidence. As if confirming her words, one of the riders raised his rifle and fired toward the house. The bullet splintered the edge of the porch railing. I believe that clarifies their intentions, Margaret observed dryly. Defend yourselves as necessary. The next moments passed in a blur of action. Blackwood's men surrounded the house, firing at windows and calling for surrender. Sarah and Margaret returned fire carefully, aiming to drive the attackers back rather than kill. From the kitchen, Robert managed to fire the hunting rifle one-handed, keeping the back door covered. You can't win this, Sarah Mitchell, Blackwood shouted from behind the cover of a large oak tree. Surrender now and I'll let you leave with your liver. After you shot my neighbors, Sarah called back. I don't believe you, Blackwood. We know about the war, Joseph, Margaret added her voice. About the information you sold to the Confederates. About the men who died because of your treachery. A stunned silence followed her words. Then Blackwood's voice, tighter with anger. Margaret Winters, so the nurse returns. I wondered if you'd surface eventually. I've been waiting for justice for 10 years, Margaret replied. It ends today, Blackwood. The only thing ending today, the Mitchell claim on this land be, Blackwood signaled to his men. Burn it down, burn it all. Sarah felt a cold terror grip her heart as one of Blackwood's men approached the barn with a torch. Fire, her deepest fear. The same death that had claimed her mother now threatened to consume the entire farm. They're going to burn the barn, she whispered, memories of her mother's death threatening to paralyze her. Margaret's voice came steady from upstairs. Sarah, you can stop them. You're stronger than your fear. Drawing a deep breath, Sarah steeled herself. This wasn't 5 years ago. She wasn't helpless now. With careful aim, she fired through the open window, the shotgun blast kicking hard against her shoulder. The man with the torch fell, dropping the flame into the dirt where it sputtered out harmlessly. Blackwood cursed loudly, ordering another man forward with a second torch. Before he could reach the barn, a new volley of gunfire erupted from the direction of the road, not aimed at the house, but at Blackwood and his men. It's Foster, Robert called from the kitchen, where he had a view of the approaching riders. Deputy Foster and some men from town. Sarah felt a surge of hope. Edith had delivered their message, and help had arrived. Blackwood's men, caught in the crossfire, began to retreat. Blackwood's running for the North Woods, Margaret shouted. He's getting away. Before Sarah could respond, another sound reached her ears. The thunder of a single horse approaching from the east, riding hard. Through the window, she glimpsed a familiar figure on a chestnut stallion, racing toward the farm. Noah, she whispered, her heart leaping. Then, with sudden horror, Noah, Blackwood's heading straight for him. Sarah's warning cry came too late. Noah had already spotted Blackwood racing toward the North Woods and turned his horse to intercept him. The two men converged in a grassy clearing just beyond the wheat field. From her position at the window, Sarah could see Blackwood rein in sharply, drawing his pistol as Noah bore down on him. Time seemed to slow as she watched the confrontation unfold. too far away to help, too close not to witness every terrible moment. "Noah!" she screamed, abandoning her post and racing toward the door. Margaret's voice cut through her panic. "Sarah, wait! Deputy Foster is closer!" Indeed, the deputy had veered toward the confrontation, spurring his horse toward Blackwood. But distance and timing worked against him. Blackwood had Noah in his sights, his face twisted with hatred. "You should have stayed dead in that ambush, Private Winters," Blackwood snarled, loud enough for his voice to carry on the morning air. Noah dismounted in one fluid motion despite his injured leg. "It's over, Blackwood. We have the evidence. Margaret Winters is here to testify." Blackwood's face paled momentarily before hardening with resolve. "Then I'll finish what I started 10 years ago." The crack of his pistol shattered the morning stillness. Sarah froze on the porch, a scream caught in her throat. But Noah had anticipated the shot, diving to the side as he drew his own weapon. His return fire caught Blackwood in the shoulder, spinning the older man back against his horse. By now, Deputy Foster had reached the clearing, his rifle trained on Blackwood. "Drop your weapon, Joseph," he commanded. "It's finished." Blackwood, clutching his bleeding shoulder, looked from Noah to the approaching deputy, then toward the house where Sarah stood, her father's shotgun now steady in her hands. For a moment, his eyes burned with defiance. Then, like a candle guttering out, the fight left him. "You'll never prove anything," he muttered as Foster dismounted to secure him. It was wartime, ancient history. "8 dead soldiers aren't ancient history," Noah replied, getting to his feet. "Neither is Elizabeth Mitchell's death." Blackwood's head snapped up. "I had nothing to do with that fire. That was an accident. Like the fire you tried to start today." Sarah had reached them, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Like the ambush that nearly killed Noah? Like my father's accident in the barn?" A flicker of something, guilt, fear, crossed Blackwood's face before he masked it. "Howard Mitchell fell from the hayloft. I wasn't anywhere near there." "Strange you know exactly how he fell when the only witnesses were Howard and whoever pushed him," Sarah said, her eyes never leaving Blackwood's face. "Pa tried to tell me before he died that his fall wasn't an accident, that he found someone searching our property. That someone was you, wasn't it?" Sweat beaded on Blackwood's forehead despite the cool morning. "You can't prove that." "We found my father's journal," Sarah pressed. "He wrote that he suspected someone was looking for the evidence against you. He was going to check the barn that night." "And that's when you confronted him," Noah added. "You pushed him from the hayloft, then set the fire, hoping the smoke would finish what the fall started." Blackwood said nothing, but the hatred in his eyes was confirmation enough. Deputy Foster tightened the ropes binding Blackwood's wrists. "Murder of a war veteran and attempted destruction of evidence. That's enough to hang you even without the treason charges, Joseph." Blackwood said nothing, but his silence was confirmation enough. "Get him to town," Foster ordered his deputies, "and make sure he stays under guard until the judge arrives." As Blackwood was led away, Sarah turned to Noah, reaching out tentatively to touch his arm. "You're not hurt?" "No." He captured her hand in his. "Sarah, She didn't let him finish, throwing her arms around him in a fierce embrace. "I thought he was going to kill you," she whispered against his chest. Noah held her close, his heart pounding as strongly as hers. "It would take more than Joseph Blackwood to keep me from returning to you." Margaret approached, a smile softening her usually reserved expression. "It seems I arrived at the Mitchell farm just in time to meet my future daughter-in-law." Sarah pulled back, blushing. "We haven't," she began, then looked up at Noah. "That is, my mother has always been perceptive," Noah said softly, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. "And unusually direct." Margaret laughed, a sound that transformed her stern countenance. "A family trait, I'm afraid." The days that followed passed in a blur of activity. Judge Parker, upon reviewing Howard Mitchell's evidence and hearing Margaret's testimony, ordered Blackwood held for trial on charges of wartime treason. The investigation into Elizabeth's death and Howard's fatal fall was reopened, with Deputy Foster personally overseeing the collection of evidence. With help from neighbors, Sarah and Noah completed the harvest before the first autumn storms. The wheat, golden and abundant, brought enough at market to pay the bank loan in full. The Mitchell farm was secure at last. The investigation continued through the winter. Blackwood's trial revealed the full extent of his crimes. The wartime treason that had cost 8 soldiers their lives. The orchestrated fire that killed Elizabeth Mitchell when she discovered him searching for evidence on their property. And finally, Howard Mitchell's murder when history repeated itself. Justice, so long delayed, was finally delivered when Blackwood was sentenced to hang for his crimes. Sarah found a measure of peace knowing that both her parents could rest easier now. The nightmares of fire that had plagued her for years gradually faded, replaced by dreams of golden wheat fields and the future she would build with Noah. On a crisp October evening, Sarah stood on the porch, watching the sunset paint the harvested fields in hues of amber and gold. Noah joined her, his hand finding hers with the easy familiarity that had grown between them. "What happens now?" Sarah asked, her voice soft in the gathering twilight. Noah turned to face her. "That depends on you, Sarah Mitchell." "On me?" "I came here to honor a debt to your father. I stayed to help with the harvest." His fingers tightened gently around hers. "But if you asked me to stay forever, I would." Sarah looked up at him, at the face that had become as essential to her as breathing. "I'm asking." Noah smiled, the expression transforming his serious features. "Then I'll stay." "Just like that? What about Oregon?" "Oregon was a dream I had when I was alone." He drew her closer. "Dreams change, Sarah. Sometimes they become better than we ever imagined." Their lips met as the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, a promise more binding than any words. Behind them in the doorway, Margaret watched with a bittersweet smile before quietly retreating to the kitchen. Some moments were sacred, meant only for those who had earned them. A year later, the Mitchell Winters farm stood transformed. The old barn had been rebuilt, larger and stronger than before. New fencing enclosed expanded fields, and a small orchard of apple trees had been planted where once there had been only wild grass. On the porch of the farmhouse, now freshly painted white, Sarah sat in a rocking chair, a small bundle cradled in her arms. The infant, Howard Thomas Winters, slept peacefully, unaware of the legacy he carried in his name. Noah emerged from the barn, followed by Margaret. They had been discussing plans for expanding the chicken coop, another of Margaret's practical suggestions that had helped the farm prosper beyond expectations. "He's still sleeping?" Noah asked, coming to stand beside his wife and son. "Like his father after a day in the fields," Sarah teased, her blue eyes bright with happiness. Margaret took the chair beside Sarah's, watching her grandson with undisguised adoration. "He has Howard's chin," she observed, "and your stubborn look, Noah." Noah laughed. "That's Sarah's influence, not mine." Sarah smiled up at him, remembering how far they had come from that first meeting in the wheat field. She had been alone, desperate, afraid of losing everything. Now, with Noah beside her and their child in her arms, she understood what her father had meant in his final moments. The farm wasn't just land, it was legacy, continuity, home. The Mitchell Winters farm would endure not just as a memorial to what had been lost, but as living proof of what could be built from the ashes of tragedy. A new beginning, a family forged through adversity, a love as enduring as the Montana sky. As the summer evening settled around them, Sarah reached for Noah's hand, gratitude filling her heart. The final harvest had yielded far more than wheat. It had yielded everything.